Hello, Garland, Nixon, and once again, we're hanging out with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. And mysteriously, President Putin, we read he had 10 different forms of cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia. I don't know how he survived all of these things and made it to the Alaska summit. Let's talk. Hello, Garland, Nixon. And for those who may be watching on Rockfin, just so you'll know, you're going to see Ray McGovern, Understanding the Russian Requirements for Peace. Let's just say I got my segments mixed up. So it's on the wrong segment. I'll get that relabeled later on, okay? Mm-hmm. They'll be talking with Ray later on this afternoon. But for right now, this is Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. And so let's get right to it, Jim. Here are my thoughts on that, actually. You know, aside all the people, look, I think we're better off if we're further away from nuclear war than being close. That's a fact. My thoughts is this. In reality, the U.S. empire is facing a catastrophic defeat. And we've been talking about that. And we've been talking about how the danger that, hey, man, at some point, there's the military and political collapse is inevitable, and the neocons and people will be saying, okay, we have to go in and fight for Ukraine, and it's just going to be, and there'll be pressure on Donald Trump, and it's that's going to be a very dangerous time, and we're getting close to it. Here's my thoughts. The U.S. war machine is trying to avoid that defeat, and they're saying, look, maybe we need to just get the hell out now and walk away and just tell the Europeans, if you want it, it's yours. But guess what? You're going to have to eat this defeat. That the U.S. is saying, we're looking, it's inevitable. Things are falling apart. How can let's walk away and leave those bastards with the defeat. Let's find a way to just ease on out of here and not eat this one. Now, whether they can do it or not, but that's my inclination to think. Throwing it to you. What are your thoughts on this, Jim Kavanaugh?
Well, Donald Trump may think that. I mean, except it is a defeat for the United States. And this is an American project. And NATO is an American project. This is a project for American hegemony in the world, and certainly over the European continent. And the defeat that's coming here is an undeniable, complete defeat of the NATO project and of the Euro-American project and the project of Euro-American hegemony over Europe. It's going to destroy, it is already destroying and hollowing out the Euro-American hegemony in the European countries. I mean, so there's no, I don't know what, again, we can only think that. And I think Trump may think that if he kind of thinks that this is not an American project and this has nothing to do with him and this has nothing to do with the United States. And I hope he does think that, and people, look, this summit, good that they had it, as many people have said, we went through the Cold War for decades with fighting and proxy wars between the United States and the Soviet Union, and they still talk to each other all the time. This idea that they shouldn't talk to Vladimir Putin, he's some kind of devil, is just ridiculous, and this is not statesmanship or diplomacy. So they talk, they should be getting, and they're instituting the discussions that may lead, hopefully will lead to better relations in other spheres, in economic and political and diplomatic spheres, and dropping all this, since Obama, I think, or maybe it was Trump, the Scripples, they eliminated all diplomatic contacts. They seized diplomatic properties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is silly. This is nonsense. So we have to have a normal kind of, at least approaching a normal diplomatic political relationship with a country like Russia. And the United States thought for decades they could just crush them and do away with it. And they still think, I mean, you read and you listen to it, they got MSNBC yesterday, they're just pissed off. How dare he meet with this dictator? He's giving him an equal status just by standing next to him. and you read the accounts and they think, oh yeah, Russia's doing pretty well now, but they're still taking 2-to-1 casualties, twice as many casualties as the Ukrainians. This is lunacy. This is delusional. And Russia's economy is on the brink of. So there's all kinds of nonsense here that they want to think that Trump is kind of giving up from a position of strength. Russia's dying to stop this because they're losing all these people and their economy's on the brink. This is nonsense. The United States, Trump asked for this because they know they're losing. The Europeans now at least know they're losing the war, but they still really don't want to get it. So I don't know. This is the problem. It looks now like it looked after the Zelensky meeting in the White House. Oh, like Trump is cutting them off and he's going to get out of this. And he's going to say, this is Joe Biden. It was Joe Biden's war. It's nothing to do with me. But I don't think he can do that. And again, like what happened after the Zelensky meeting, a month later, 2 weeks later, he's saying exactly the opposite. So in what's going on in Trump, people are misoverestimating, to use Bush's terminology, the consistency of what's going on in Trump's mind at any given moment. I don't know what he's going to do in 2 weeks from now, and people thought going in, maybe there'd be a deal with it. Russians weren't giving any deals. They gave up nothing. This clearly was a statement by Putin and a victory of Putin. It says they gave up nothing. And Donald Trump's coming out of it. And now people are saying what they think Russia's going to do. Oh, now Russia wants to give us Donbass and we'll have we'll stop the war. But it's not necessarily true. They talking about Kherson and Zaporozhye. They have said very clearly they want that too. And they have said very clearly, and they're still saying, Putin said it in the so-called press conference, we want a new security architecture in Europe and the whole of Europe that recognizes our national security interests. Nobody's talking about that yet, and that's what, the most negative, I guess, line of this is, I ascribe it to Brian Berletic, and he's been very good about it. The Americans want the Europeans to take over, but they will support them in the background. And they don't really want to change the security architecture of Europe. They want to stop this war, stop their participation, not necessarily the war. They want to stop their obvious direct participation in it, but they want to keep the pressure on Russia, and they don't want to reorganize the whole of the European security architecture to take account of Russia's national interest. And the European countries don't want to do that. So it's a mess that, what's going on in Donald Trump's mind is an important part of it, but it's not necessarily the defining part of it. And we don't know. And that changes every week anyway. So it's very, very difficult. As I said many times to you, and I said in my article about negotiation kabuki 2 years ago, the problem that the most difficult thing and the most kind of impossible thing that the Russians posed about this from the beginning, about what their goals were, was to denazify Ukraine. That is to eliminate the entire Banderite ideology of Ukraine, which is a Nazi ideology, not neo-Nazi, not neo-fascist. It's plain old Hitlerite Nazi ideology. And it is that which is at the basis of this. And they want war with Russia. That's what they're in this for. They always knew they're not going to defeat Russia. They're in this. They started this. They want this to bring the United States to war with Russia and NATO to war with Russia. So they're not going to give up without that. And so it's crazy for the Russians to think, you might say, and I say, it's like, this is the most difficult. They can defeat Ukraine militarily, but in order to get rid of that's a whole regime change thing, really, in Western Ukraine. That's very difficult to do. But on the other hand, if the Americans or the Europeans think that they're going to have some settlement here, which involves allowing the Russians to keep Crimea or the Donbass regions, they're going to have to denazify Ukraine because the Nazis won't allow that. The resolution that the Americans and Europeans think they might get out of this is fantasy, in the sense that they're going to have to go in there and defeat the Nazis to do that, to get away with that anyway. Anything less than the total defeat of Russia is not going to be accepted by the Ukrainian Nazis, and they will get rid of Zelensky, and So this is the problem. And, one of the things I foresee possibly coming out of this is if Trump stays on this track and talks to Zelensky, and really he's ordering Zelensky around. What can Zelensky do? And there's any sense coming out of it in Kiev that Zelensky is going to go along with some less than we'll give no territory ever back to Russia, and then that might lead to the fascists in Ukraine overthrowing Zelensky and that would be the way out for the United States. Really, once that happens, then Trump can say, well, this isn't even the same Ukraine that we got started with. And even the Europeans are going to be, oh, what the heck, what can we do with this now? So there's a whole lot of things that can go on, that might go on, but everybody should be aware that that Russia has not said it's going to do anything. Russia hasn't said, we'll accept if you give us the Donetsk and Lugansk, we'll stop on a line of contact in Kherson and Zaporozhye. They haven't said that. These are, again, American and Europeans talking to themselves about what they think Russia should accept. So Russia has its position out there, and it's very clear, and it involves a lot of things that nobody, the Americans or the Europeans or the Trump administration, are talking about seriously, which involve rearranging the whole security architecture of Europe and the Eurasian continent in a way that's different and that takes Russia into account as essentially precisely an equal partner in this, at least an equal partner. They're part of this, and they're not just something to be managed by the Americans and Europeans. So that's what's all of this stuff has not resolved and has not, I don't think, really moved more than an inch towards resolving, besides, notionally, oh, maybe we'll go further and talk about this, but there's been nothing decided about that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I put that, partially in jest, the title "Putin survives Parkinson's and cancer to attend summit." But one of the reasons I put that was it's representative of something. It's representative of, okay, we hate Putin, we don't like him, so therefore let's write articles that, if they were true, we'd be happy about. If it was true, I literally saw an article. I think Andrei Martyanov had it up, and it said Putin is in pain from stomach cancer and falls down the stairs and soiled himself. Right? I mean, just absurd stuff. This was at the beginning of the war, but you remember it. He had Parkinson's, dementia, stomach cancer, brain cancer, every disease known to man. Right? And when you read it, you're like, why are they writing that? I've watched the guy walking every other day. I'm looking at the video, wandering around. He's doing karate. He's beating people. He's riding a horse with no shirt. Come on, that guy looks like this. I wish I was in as good a shape as he is, right?
Yeah.
But they hate him so bad that they just say it. He's got cancer. Why? Because I hate him. That's why he's got cancer, because I hate him, right? And it is a pattern. So now it's, what's going on with the Russians? They're losing 2 million people. Why? Yeah. Because I hate Russians. They have to be losing 2 million people. Yeah. Well, what else? Well, they're missiles. They're out of missiles. And they use washing machine chips for their and shovels. Why? Yeah. Because we hate him. It's almost like Russiagate when the Democrats. Oh, Trump's a Putin bot, and you're like, but none of that stuff makes sense. But I hate Trump. Yeah. So it has to make sense. And what we see is this delusional way of thinking that certainly allows the powers that be to delude these people. But as you said, the higher you go up, the harder you have to fall. The more you believe that the Ukrainians are winning, the Russians are losing, Putin is dying of cancer and all that, when reality hits you. And one day it's like, well, it's like the Battle of Sepultava or whatever. Again, the Ukrainians have 20,000 men surrounded. The war's ended. They're running for their lives. Kiev's, being under siege. Then it's like, what happened? What? Yeah. Well, wait a minute. And see, I think that's the thing that the Europeans, more so than the Americans, the Europeans have. And that is, man, we've lied to our people and they've really suffered. The Europeans more so, they've taken a beating here, right? And we told them that as soon as this was over, Putin was going to come across the border and get them. What happens when it's over and Putin ain't coming across the border to get him? And the European people say, well, you told us that as soon as he won, he was heading for the English Channel. You told us, and we've been deindustrialized. We've lost all of our social programs, all these terrible, we've lost all of our what little rights we thought we had, all of that. And you told us we had to do that because the Russians are going to get us, and the Russians have won, and they're like kind of staying there. They're not doing what you, where's this? The Europeans have risked everything. It's like they can't let go. The European ruling elite, I'm saying.
Yeah, well, they have. They put their credibility entirely on the line with this, and they keep doing it. And yeah, as you say, it's like Putin is the micro instantiation. Putin is dying of cancer, but he's also a brutal dictator who's killing everybody. Russia is on its last legs. It's losing all its men. It's got, it's inflation. The economy is going under. It can't sell any gas, but it's about to take over the rest of Europe. It can barely survive the conflict in Ukraine, but it's about to march to the channel, as you say. It's just silly stuff, but they have to have a reason. And they can't talk about the real reasons. They can't talk about what happened from 2014 on, and the Minsk 1-2 and the Istanbul agreements that they reneged on. And so, they're the untrustworthy ones, and they're the ones who wanted this conflict. They wanted to provoke a conflict with Russia, and what the nature of the Kiev regime is. So, yeah, I mean, and they're the ones who've been hurt by it, the Europeans most of all. So they've been pushing their populations to continue supporting this, and they have to have reasons for it. And it's got to be, he's just an evil, crazy man, and we were about to get attacked ourselves, and all this other nonsense. They can't say anything else. There's nothing else that makes any sense. The truth of it doesn't make any sense. That it doesn't give a reason for them to do this. So they continue on that path, and they've got themselves involved embedded in it and enmeshed in it in a way that's hard for them, even they're psychologically themselves, to get out of it. I mean, what are you going to say? As you say, the moment is coming. It's coming. The Ukrainian forces, this is in a Polish newspaper yesterday, the level at which the Ukrainian forces in the Pokrovsk region are just disintegrating. They're not capable of mounting a coordinated defense. The Russian counter battery efforts, once the Ukrainian artillery fires a shell, the Russians are on it in seconds, either with counter battery and missiles or with swarms of drones. They're on their supply lines in seconds with swarm. Now the Russians are outdoing the Ukrainians with drones, and the Ukrainians don't have a well-coordinated defense. They can't. The Russians have gotten behind their defensive lines. So, and the Ukrainians brought in brigades that were fighting elsewhere. Now those places, in Sversk and Kramatorsk, they're going to be weakened. Those positions are going to be weakened. And they brought in brigades that have said, we were preparing for the defense of Kiev. So, this is a dangerous, we are, I believe, approaching a turning point and I think even the Europeans, certainly the British, are starting to realize, there are articles in the British press about this is over. British military people, Russians aren't going to win. They've already won. And this is, we're not going to reverse this. So, but what can they do about it? And the only thing they can do is bring NATO in, which means bring the Americans in, and really, even on that circumstance, the only thing militarily, the only weapons they have that they think that might have the possibility are nuclear weapons. It's extremely dangerous. And I don't know what the president of the United States, whoever he is, whatever little thoughts he has in his mind, is going to do when that happens, when it's clear the Russians have a free path to Kiev and the Kiev government goes away. When you have a Saigon moment or an Afghan moment, Donald Trump is going to have to decide what he's going to do in that circumstance, because he's going to be blamed, and by the Republicans and by the whole apparatus of neocon America. He's going to be blamed for losing Ukraine, and it's going to be a nasty scene. So he's either going to, again, get out of it beforehand and pre-blame someone else, Joe Biden, but it's kind of beyond that at this point. He's got Zelensky, so if something happens in Ukraine and Kiev that really upends the government, and you see really unhideable fascist forces come into power, that may be an excuse. But still, the United States is losing. NATO is losing, and the United States is losing, and it's not going to be. Fox News can't portray this as some kind of victory, and can't deny that this is a loss. Okay, we're giving this up deliberately so that we go fight China. You haven't made yourselves more capable of fighting China by losing here, and I don't know what's going to happen. So I just urge everybody not to be complacent about the idea that, oh, Trump's about to leave and drop this. I mean, Trump may think he wants to do this, but he thinks. But again,
if he can, yeah, I don't know.
First of all, I don't know whether what he thinks today is what he's going to think tomorrow, and B, I don't know whether he can. He's the commander of a ship that has a crew and has a destination that was set before and that has a mission, and that's what he's put in place to do. So we're going to have to see. It is still a very, very dangerous situation.
You know, I that's why I go back to this, that I think that, look, we know it. Me and you know it. I think that the Russians know it. They're sitting here having the same discussion that we're having. I think that somewhere in the bowels of the Pentagon or the Trump administration, somebody's having this discussion. They know what the hell's going on. And I think that that's part of what this is about, that the Russians are saying, look, we're getting to this point where we got to start having a discussion and be in talks with the U.S. as Ukraine crumbles so that we can manage the collapse of Ukraine. I think that's what it's about. The Russians understand it. We don't want this to go to an all-out confrontation or war. So we have to be talking to the Americans so we can manage this. We're going to kick their asses, and there ain't no way about that. But we got to manage this. We have to have open channels, and we have to be. And I think it's very wise of the Russians. My favorite thing there was Sergei Lavrov showing up with the CCCP shirt. That was I was just gonna say, looking at your shirt today, I was gonna say the better shirt is the CCCP. That was the great shirt. That was great.
But they're sold out now. They're sold out.
I'm sure. Sure. But that was awesome. I love Sergei Lavrov. That Russian dry humor. That humor the Russians have is you know. But at any rate, so I think that
Putin is just really. I mean, he's just playing Trump. I mean, oh, Trump is wonderful. Hey, we never would have had this war if Trump, if Trump were the president. You know, he's giving Trump exactly what he wants. And, you know, flattery gets you everywhere with Trump. And so Trump is now liking what he hears from him. And of course, as we said before, we're talking on the phone, Trump loves to be one of the tough guys. And
yes,
he thinks, on the one hand, this is his narcissism. I am the toughest guy in the world. I mean, but he knows he's not. So he wants to get next to the guys who he knows are really tough.
He knows, yeah.
and then maybe, you know, oh, look at me. Vlad and I are up here together. We're the tough guys. Because Vladimir Putin really is a tough guy in a certain sense. And, you know, he's been at it for a long time. He knows what he's doing. He's smart. He's capable. Trump isn't that. And he knows he isn't that. He thinks I'm the greatest president in the world. I'm Nobel Peace Prize. But, you know, what he wants is to get next to the people who are really that. And maybe he'll get some of absorb some of that from him. So it gets some of the reflected glory. So it's so bizarre to see that. And it looks like, I hope it is the case that Putin is not sucked in by that, but is actually playing it to the hilt.
First of all, Putin's former KGB. Putin's a lawyer. Yeah. Putin's also got a degree and a PhD in economics. I mean, he's a smart guy. You know, they sat around and they determined this is what we're going to do. This is the type of guy we're dealing with. This is the angles. This was all carefully scripted and calculated by the Russians. They're very sharp. You know what I mean? Yeah. But not in a negative way. Not in a we want to play Trump so we take advantage of him and defeat and hurt Trump. It was more like, we got a situation here and we have characters in this play. And we've got to figure out how to massage the various characters in this play. You know, we know Trump has forces behind him. And we know when we approach Trump, we got to take into account these forces behind him. We know the Europeans, what we can offer and what they won't take. And we got to have a preparation for when we make this offer and they say no. So I think the Russians are sharp. I think they're going to play this as smart as they possibly can. They understand what's going here. Here's the reality, as you said. Recently, the Europeans finally said there's no coalition of the willing. We couldn't even get together 25,000 troops.
Yep.
You know, they recently came together and said, yeah, we tried to get 25,000 troops. We couldn't. So they know that kinetically they don't have it. And what's interesting is the Israelis are like, okay, we got to get the Americans here so we can attack Lebanon and Iran, and we got to get the Americans over here so we can attack everybody. Right. The Europeans, well, we got to get the Americans over here so we can. So the Americans have started all of these fires with all of these Nazis and fascists and warmongers all over the place. And now they put themselves in a position where all the warmongers are like, hey, come over here and join our war. No, forget their war. It's our war. It's the real one. You need to be over here fighting this one. Don't listen to them. Come to our war. And the U.S. is sitting there like, and we don't have the capacity to fight either one of the wars. And we're also going broke. You know, our economic system of neoliberalism is not a sustainable model, shall we say? To be charitable, it's neoliberalism. It ain't a sustainable model, right? So they're caught there. But at any rate, I think that I don't know, the current crop in Europe. Right, because there are people saying, well, if the Americans say, look, this is how it is, you better do it. And we're hearing some people say this, that these people in Europe will say, okay, we got through the. I don't think they will. I don't think they will. I think they got to go down with the ship. You know, I'll just say this. One time years ago, I was like, 20 years old, right? And in that age, and there was an older guy. Bottom line story. He was dating some girl and she caught him cheating or something, and he denied it. And we're like, oh, well, you're in a lot of trouble. He goes, nope, I told a lie. I got to go down with the lie. Right. And I remember thinking, I don't know if that's to me, but I understood where he was coming from. He's going down with the lie. He ain't going to change it. Right. Yeah. I think that's where the Europeans are. I think they're like, we've stuck everything out. We lied about it, everything. We told them we were going to win. We told them everything's going to work. At this point, if you're Starmer, if you're Merritt, you already got like a single digit approval rating. What alternative do they have then to completely go down with the lie? Jim? Oh, I think Jim might have frozen. Darn it. Oh, darn. I think Jim froze on me. That's okay. Here's what we're going to do. Hopefully Jim's hearing us. Jim, if you could. Oh, there you go. Jim.
I'm back.
Okay, you froze for a second. Hey, sometimes, to be quite frank, sometimes StreamYard will do that. And if you freeze, if I can't get you back, just sign out and sign back in, and that usually helps it. Okay, go ahead. Well, I was talking about the Europeans going down with the lie.
I just saw that the AfD in Germany is now the most popular party. It's surpassed the CDU. So, and so the political and economic pressures in Europe are off the charts. Look, Macron had to prevent the winning parties from taking power in France last year. It's incredible. So you've got popular pressure that's going to explode in some way or another, and these leaders are going down. They're going down, and the European economies are going down. But the leadership, the elite, and their credibility is gone, and it will be completely gone when Ukraine collapses. And what will they do? And that's why they are going to put an enormous pressure on the Americans, and there are an enormous faction of American politicians and elite who are with them on this. Still, we can't let this go down like this. It is an existential defeat for the Euro-American alliance and the Euro-American hegemony in the world. And I don't see how they can save it for all the reasons we know, the economic reasons, the military. Look, NATO has disarmed itself by sending all its arms to Ukraine. They don't have any more missiles. They don't have any more tanks. The Americans have to come in. And even then, they don't have it. Russia is now producing missiles and tanks and drones. And again, the only way they can stem this off militarily is with nuclear weapons. I'm sorry, but that's it. That's not gone away. That possibility is still there, and it's the only possibility that. And you have the factions in Europe that are still very powerful, the factions in the United States that are still very powerful, and the factions in Ukraine that are very, very powerful, and they're going to be pushing for what Joseph Borrell said 3 years ago. We cannot allow the Russians to win. It will be the defeat of NATO. It's been true.
And it will.
True now, absolutely true. And so what are you going to do? So I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm not trusting the latest news out of Alaska or the latest news of Trump on Truth Social about that, because the forces behind that are out there behind the scenes, who are absolutely still, resistant to, refusing to allow that to happen, are still there. So I don't know what they're going to do.
Look at the Washington Post on any given day.
Yeah,
no, they're still going with, yes, Trump says he may swap land. The Russians is not land. This is not about land.
Yeah.
This is about NATO expansion. So they're still trying to push the narrative that the Russians simply want to take more land and expand and reclaim the Soviet empire. That narrative as they say, that dog don't hunt no more. The Russians are making it clear. This is what it's about. I think that one of the things we're seeing, J.D. Vance was over there saying, hey, look, we ain't funding this thing anymore, right? But what's interesting is, what does Hegseth say? Hegseth says, you take it. Hegseth says, look, we want to keep this going. We want to go ahead and you just keep hassling Russia, and we'll sell you the stuff to hassle Russia. And then we'll go hassle China or Iran or somebody else. We'll go, you guys maintain this struggle against Russia, and you just give up everything and send your troops, whatever you want to do. You go suffer and continue to make Russia's life miserable. I mean, Hegseth comes out and says that we'll send you stuff. Now, there are some problems there in that the U.S. literally can't make the stuff. We literally, if they can give us, they'll be like, here's $1 billion worth of weapons. And we're like, okay, that is on the ledgers. And it looks like 2029. No, 2039.
Yeah,
My bad. We got the 2 wrong. That's a 3. So that's the other part. They literally cannot deliver on the weapons in the physical world. But the reality is, and I think the Russians know, look, the U.S. wants to go to Azerbaijan. I got questions whether that'll ever get through the Armenian parliament ever, but they want to. So the Russians are looking at it saying, they're still fooling around in the Caucasus. Yeah, they're going after our ships. They're after China. They're doing this. The Russians have no delusions that the U.S. empire has suddenly turned into, a gentle kitten. The Russians know they're still after them, but I think they want to play their hand as best they can.
Yeah. And let me say, it's of course we're talking about this today because it's the day after Alaska and all that stuff. But, we both know, and we say it all the time when we're talking, Gaza is a horror show. It drives us crazy every day. It's horrible. It's terrible, and as I've said, I understand the Russians and the Chinese that's not the biggest problem for them. And to a certain extent, it's for Russia, it's a propitious diversion for them. The United States has to get involved in that. And remember, but Russia and China want to demonstrate that the unipolar world is over and that they're a new source of power. This is the one thing they could do something about, that the whole world would be with them for. They have the power to go in there and force humanitarian aid into Gaza. And if they're not doing it, then they're still allowing the Americans to control that situation and the Israelis to control that situation in a way that is not ultimately beneficial to them. You look at what's happening with the Zangezur corridor, etc. This is a bad game. And I understand that, that's not their national interest right now. Of course, the Palestinian people are nobody's national interest, but they're the world's national interest in the sense that this is a genocide and it's horrible. And if you let the Americans get away with this, you're saying, I'm standing back and letting the Americans control that the situation of genocide in the world. That's not, you're ceding that territory to the Americans. You're not challenging them in one of the most important things, the most important, not about which, a thing about which is nothing more important in the world and nothing more indicative of who controls and who runs the world. So I'll say that. But yeah, the Russians they have to be looking at what's going on in Azerbaijan and Armenia, and they have to be saying, and as again, and Iran, and it seems like I hope the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese have figured out together a way that everybody, apparently the Iranians didn't want to accept certain things because they want to be on their own, but this is beyond this point, So the Americans are going to attack on other fronts. They are attacking on other fronts, and they will attack on other fronts. They'll go back. They're going back to the Caucasus with the Armenia-Azerbaijan thing, and attacking Iran is a threat to Russia and China. It is. I mean, and that's coming. So they have to be aware of that. And the Americans are overextending themselves to a great extent, and but they have the power to do damage in all of these situations. The one thing they have power to do is project power for a while, but but a lot of very damaging power for a short while anyway, on countries that can't stand it. And everybody has decisions to make about how to account for these things. The problem for the Russians, for the Americans and the Europeans, is certainly for the Europeans, they're losing power. They don't have the power to deal with any of this stuff, right? And they have to try and get the Americans in. But there are too many fronts now for the Americans really to be effective on, except in a negative and damaging way. And the Russians are concentrated on one front that is existentially important to them, and they're going to finish that. That's perfectly understandable. So we're still in this extremely dangerous, uncertain period where how the transition from American unipolar hegemony is going to play out, we don't know the answer to it. And yeah, Russia wants to get together and be talking to the United States, so they, as you say, can manage that process in some way.
Yeah.
I think it's naive to think that the Americans are really accepting that, oh yeah, that's what we're doing, we're going to manage that process. I think behind the scenes, they're trying to figure out a way of stopping it. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, keep in mind, see, that's the other problem, and I know the Russians are aware of this. When you say the Americans, it's bad when you're dealing with a treacherous enemy, right? And a lying and treacherous and insecure and duplicitous enemy. But when that enemy's even fighting amongst itself, they're even more dangerous and duplicitous. Because even if one faction, for everything that one faction, because we've got factions there saying, hey, we shouldn't be fighting here, like an Eldridge Colby. No, but this is crazy. We got to stop this. Why? So we can go over here and fight China. Then we got the Zionists. This is madness. Why? We should have all of our troops in over here to finish killing genocide in the Palestinians and attacking everybody in the Middle East. So not only do you have a empire that is irrational, that is trying to hold on to a hegemony that it's already lost, trying to stop a multipolar world that is already here. You've got all of that, but in that, you have warring factions. And I mean factions that are really at odds with each other. Yeah. You got factions saying, no, we shouldn't be at war here, here, here. And now you've got the Lindsey Graham and these people saying, no, Trump, you have to stick it out and go as far as possible. Put troops on the ground. We have to do sanctions that'll wipe out our own economy. And just we have to Nord Stream America.
Yeah,
really, economically, what we did to Germany, we need to do to ourselves. We need to take an action in an attempt to hurt the Russians. They won't really hurt the Russians, but will screw us forever. So you have that irrational. You got others like, well, let's find a different way to go after the Russians. This isn't working. So if you are trying to deal with these people, you ain't dealing with a person, and even the guy you're dealing with.
Yeah,
you don't know if he wants, even if he wants to do something. For all you know, if he finally gets to the point that he'll do it, they might kill him. What happened to Trump? Well, he died in his sleep last night of a heart attack.
Yeah. No, we've talked about that. I think Trump he could have a heart attack. Yeah. I mean, he's inconsistent. As you say, from the Russian point of view, they have to realize, it's not the same as talking with someone. You know what their line is, what their political line is, what their political purpose is, what their political ideology and program is. All you know about Trump is he likes getting pat on the back. He likes the flattery. He's a narcissist. You don't really know. He doesn't really have a strong political ideology and program. Okay, and there are different factions behind him who do, but they're different, and none of them like you, but they have other things going on. So it's a very difficult thing to deal with. And from our point of view, from the point of view of American, have to realize this. You have, as I've said, Trump is incompetent in a way that, not in a different way than Biden was, but Biden, we know that Biden's decisions were being made by someone else, and he wasn't making the decisions. Trump can make decisions. He's not as incompetent as Trump as Biden in that way. He can stand up and make a decision if he wants. You just know what it's going to be, and
how long before he's going to reverse?
We don't know where he's going to go among the different factions and pressure points that are on him, and it's extremely difficult. That's why I say I find it very dangerous. I just really want to caution everybody: don't think what Trump said on Truth Social yesterday, or what he said in his meeting with Putin, is the end of it. It's not. We don't know where it's going from here.
I think you're right. That's the key, and that is, and I think, as I said, the Russians are smart, and I think everything that we're talking about, these are the conversations that they're having inside of the Kremlin, which means they have backup plan after back. Well, think about it. If you are planning for this, you got to have backup plan after backup plan. You have to say, we're going to do this. This is the plan. But if the Americans do this, this, or this, this is the plan. And you notice one thing, and I think this is my argument, that the Russians are there. Their level of consistency. The Russians have said, this is what we want, and this is how we want it, right? And they've held to it. And I think really they almost absolutely had to, because the other side was so unstable. They had to have a compass. They had to have something that grounded them, saying, this is our list of things that we must accomplish. And that holds us grounded. And you can run all over the place, but everybody sooner or later has to come back to this.
Yep.
Whatever they do, they can say, oh, the Russians want to take ground. But and if you notice, when Trump left, he had to talk about it. He had to say, they want a lasting peace. That's the Russians' words. That's their terms.
Yeah, I know.
But at some point, when you sit down with the Russians and you say, well, how about if we trade you this land for that? And they say, well, that sounds great, but we got to have a lasting peace and we got to do the root causes. Oh, well, fair enough. How about if we don't do this and you do this? And they say, but when it comes to and no matter what you say in front of them, everything says NATO expansion, lasting peace. At some point, you're like, we're not getting anywhere with these Russians.
Yeah.
They're not even going to entertain the rest of this stuff. And I think that's where the Russians are, that they are grounded in a lasting peace based on the list that we gave you in December of 2021. That's the only place to go. And I believe the Trump team, successfully or unsuccessfully, you can argue, the Trump team and certain factions are simply saying, we're in the middle of a collapse. We ain't got a lot of time. We got weeks, days, weeks, maybe a couple months. And we manage this collapse so we come out at least as clean as possible, or we don't know how the hell it comes. And we just get I think they're looking at Bagram Air Force on steroids. They're looking at Saigon on steroids. They're going to be nothing compared to this the biggest proxy, the whole country on Russia's border. Mm-hmm. Those things are nothing compared to the catastrophic, cataclysmic defeat. This is the end of NATO. This is the actual end of U.S. hegemony rhetorically, because the rest of the world is going. They're going to be like, do this, do that, do this, and you then do that, and the world's going to be, guys, you just got your ass kicked by the Russians. Don't make me call Putin. Don't make me call Putin on you. You're going to get smart. We'll call Putin to kick your ass again. At that point, you're done.
Well, look, this is what the Russians, I hope, and I think they've learned very clearly is that America is not agreement capable, that the leadership is peripatetic, to say the least, and that they are overextended all over the world. They have a notion that you keep control of a world they can't keep control of, and they've already lost control of in many ways. And they have been steady. I hope, and I think, and it looks like their grounding now is, we are winning this war militarily. We're on the battlefield. We are going to pursue our plans. This is what we're going to do. That's our plan, is to keep pressing forward on the battlefield and win the war militarily. And as long as they do that, and the Americans and the Europeans think they're going to talk the Russians out of that in some way. And they talk to themselves and figure out plans that they think will work to talk the Russians out of it. And a lot of people who are on the side of the Russians are worried that the Russians will be talked out of it, because they have before, as Putin himself admits. They took us. So you know, everybody's in this frame of mind that, oh, what's going to happen next? But I think the Russians at this point are, you know, their compass is winning the military victory on the battlefield. That is going to undermine and destroy the political foundations of the Banderite Kiev state and the political foundations. And it's already destroyed the military and economic foundations of NATO, and it's going to destroy the political foundations of NATO. But that's a big thing. I mean, you know, this is the end of NATO as a dominant military political power is a huge thing. And they can, it will happen as a result of NATO's stupidity in engaging in a military conflict with Russia in Ukraine. But they did that. They put themselves all in on it. And they're going to lose all because of that. They're all in lost because of that. And again, I see it happening. I think the Russians, if they're understood things correctly, and I think they have, see this happening, their compass and their grounding is we're just going to grind on militarily until we destroy the Ukrainian army and then the Ukrainian state as the current Ukrainian state. And they will succeed in doing that. Until and unless, even if the Americans come in, they'll succeed in doing it. The Americans just blow up the rest of the world. But I don't know who's going to really let that happen. I think the Americans and Europeans at all levels think they're going to figure out some way of finessing their way out of this and stopping the Russians from getting to that point where NATO is destroyed. So we'll see.
You know, yeah, I'll put it like this, and this is you know, Al Sharpton, a guy who, you know, is a grifter and everything else, but he said some smart things in his life, and one of the things that he said was when the U.S. went into Iraq, and they said, "Oh, the U.S., can we get out with dignity?" And Al Sharpton said, "No." They said, "Why?" He said, "Because we lost our dignity when we went in." Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you get out of the you know, can you get out of this thing with some dignity without a crushing blah, 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 blah? No. Because the day you went in, the day you said, okay, we've been beating around the bush with Russia forever. We're going to go ahead and take them out now.
Yeah.
Historically speaking, man, when you start swinging, taking punches at Russia, you're cruising for a bruise, the young folks would say, right? The day you went after Russia, it was all or nothing. The day you went after Russia, you know, we're the U.S. empire, but not just the U.S. empire. The U.S., all of Europe. I think that's what makes it look so bad. All of Europe. And then they said, hey, we're going to get stuff. We find out later, they emptied out Pakistan, South Korea, all these countries. They went in South America. Every country, every vassal they could, they got stuff. We needed more. Send it to Ukraine. And Russia kicked all of their asses. And the rest of the world's looking at it. And now they're like, okay, India, do what we tell you. And India's like, those days are over, buddy. We're going to go over here and talk to China. China's the real power now. You guys have been exposed, right? And you know, the Africans are like, screw you, man. We're hanging out with the Russians. The North Koreans, they're hanging out in Burkina Faso, protecting Traore. Everybody's like, you can't have Traore. We're going to protect him, right? And now the world, and it's bad enough now. After you lose to Russia, Mexico won't even listen to you. Yeah. Nobody will listen to you. After you, this whole thing of going after China and Iran, when you lose to Russia, your street cred disappears. And it's it for NATO. It's over for NATO. People aren't going to want to buy your weapons. India's already like, we're not buying F-35. Then everybody's going to be like, we want to buy Russia's weapons. Why? Well, because their works, they can you with their weapons. We want theirs. Yeah. It's a dangerous situation because if you and I know this, the military-industrial complex, everything. I think, let me ask you this. The war will shift. Here's what I mean. Between NATO and Russia, right? I had a guy I know who's Ukrainian, and he told me, he says, you know, can't even talk to my mother or my parents or whatever. And he's like, why? Because they hate Putin so bad. They're Banderites. He said they're Nazis. And they kind of pretty much, his family back in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, has pretty much disowned him because they're Banderites and he's not, right? And he says, I'm telling you, I will guarantee you this. When this war's over, there's going to be a civil war. He said, because you're going to have people saying to the Banderites, look what you did to us. Look what you did to our country. You kidnapped our kids. We're going to kill you. And they're going to be going after them. Then you're going to have people saying, we're not going to have Putin come in here and run that. They said, they will. I'm guarantee you there will be a civil war, because that's where I'm from. And I'm telling you, this is what this was 2 years ago. He told me this. Here's my point. You think the various factions are fighting now. Wait till this thing falls and they're all trying to run from blame. It wasn't our fault. It was Trump's fault. And Trump's going to say, oh, no, that was Biden's war. And it was the neocons and Jack Keane. You all said they were going to know it wasn't me. And when they start trying to duck, there will be an internal, ideally political, hopefully, ideological civil war in the United States and in Europe. I don't see how you can avoid that amongst the ruling elite, Jim.
Well, it's already brewing in the United States and Europe in a whole lot of ways, but that's going to exacerbate it immensely. And in Ukraine, as I say, there's going to have to be a struggle with and against the fascists. They're going to have to be. There will be. And there is a incipient civil war already. You see people fighting the recruiters.
The TCC recruiters. Yeah, killing them.
Yeah, the military recruiters. They're fighting them on the street and winning and grabbing people away from them. And it was all inscribed from the beginning. The day that Russia announced it was recognizing the two Donbas republics, I wrote an article that day. I said, this is the end of NATO. Because before Russia even invaded, I said, because that means Russia's going to now defend those two republics. That means Russia is recognizing them as, and people don't even talk about this fact. And what Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia's justification for that, its United Nations international law justification, was, which the Donbas republics had been trying for 8 years to get Russia to recognize them as independent. And Putin wouldn't do it. You got to stay in Ukraine. Finally, in February 2022, Russia said, we recognize the two republics. That means now they're countries that I can come to the defense of. Russia's position isn't that it invaded Ukraine just because it wanted to take those republics. It was, we came in to defend what we consider it's just like Bangladesh and East Pakistan. People don't know, to defend what we consider independent countries. Once they recognize them as independent, then they have an international law justification for coming to their military defense. And only after that did they have the elections where they agreed to become part of Russia. But the minute that Russia, I knew what was going on. The minute that Russia recognized them, the Americans can't let that stand. And Russia, the only way Russia is going to allow it to stand is by defending them militarily in a way. I didn't really think, I didn't perceive that Russia would necessarily go as far as it went. But I said, there's going to have to now be a military fight over this, because there can't not be. And in that military fight, Russia's going to win because they can't lose in that. So that was the end of NATO, unless NATO would say, okay, we recognize those republics too, which they weren't going to do. See? So this is the problem. And as you know, I guess it's McCurry's been saying this a couple of times, the Americans get involved in these wars. And from the beginning, they say, oh, their opponent has a program. And it's usually a program of national unity and liberation. And the Americans come in and they say, we'll never allow this. We'll never allow it. And after 5 or 10 years of fighting, they agree to everything that the other side wanted. That's what happened in Vietnam. It's what happened in Afghanistan. Because really, this is not existential for the United States. It's existential for those countries. Those are their people. Whatever you think about them or like about them, they're going to fight for that. And this is the same damn thing. And Mearsheimer said it 100 times, and it's true. Ukraine isn't that. And Barack Obama said it. He had the brain to say, we can't get in that fight over there because that's existential for Russia. It's not existential for us. They're not going to give up. We are. Ultimately, we are. But they've been stupid enough for 9 years and for the last 3 years to say, oh, we can't lose. We can't lose. We can't lose. Guess what? You can't win. So you lost the minute you went into that. And you you put yourself in a position where you're automatically, inevitably, let's say, going to lose. And if you didn't see that, I'm sorry, you're delusional. You're deluded by your own ideology of your own omnipotence, and we're the center of the world, and we're the hyperpower. And if we want to do something, and look at what every time you did that, even when you were more powerful than you are, you were defeated by the Vietnamese. You were defeated by the Taliban. I mean, with help from their allies. Oh, guess who the allies are in Ukraine? I mean, you're going to be defeated, and you can't win that war. So it's been from the outset. It was inscribed in this that it was a failure. Now the question is, what that failure is going to visit, what the Americans and the Westerners and the Americans, really, they're the deciders, are going to what kind of destruction they're going to visit on the world in order to try and pretend this isn't a failure.
Yeah, and now they're, let me just say one other thing. Something I mentioned earlier, Azerbaijan. They want to go into this landlocked area of Azerbaijan with Russia on one side and Iran on the other side, right? And we're gonna the Zanzor corridor, whatever it is, right? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, look where it is. It's right between Iran and Russia, and boy, that's really dangerous for Iran and Russia, right? Because if the U.S. builds bases and puts missiles in there, and they're sitting right on Russia's border, and they're sitting right on Iran's border, and boy, they can really do some damage. Well, I guess it's 3 words: Dien Bien Phu.
Yeah,
You familiar with the story of Dien Bien Phu? That's what I call the Zanzor corridor, or Zanzig, or whatever. It's Dien Bien Phu. We're so powerful, we're going to go out into the middle of enemy territory and build a fort. The high grounds all around us, and we're going to have that fort so we can harass the enemy in their own territory. And they never stop to think, well, you will be in enemy territory and they'll be surrounding you. No, the hubris, we're so powerful. And I'm like, so you think it's a good idea, 5,000 miles from the United States, to build a fort, a landlocked fort, on the locked between these 2 gigantic powerful countries, both that just finished kicking your ass into the ground. And you're going to stick a fort between the 2 of them. And you think that fort is going to be scary to them? If I'm in the military, you know what I say? Please do not station me at that fort, because if any war kicks off, I'd say my lifespan is about 10 minutes. If war kicks off, you know what Iran's going to do? 50 hypersonic missiles. You know what the U.S. is going to say? I mean, what the Russians are going to say if something kicks off? Get me a couple of Oreshniks and plant them to good old Dien Bien Phu / the Zanzor corridor. And if a war starts that you're going to attack Russia from this area and Iran, they will vaporize that with conventional weapons. They will vaporize that within the first few seconds of the war. So the idea that they're going to build that, and but I think the Iranians have already said, if you put that there, we're going to blast it. That means war. The Iranians have already said that.
They said they're threatening military action. Yeah.
Well, do they have a choice? Do they have a choice? If that goes there, then the drones, terrorism, the Mossad will constantly harass and attack them. They have no choice. If you put that in there, it's already war. But if I'm even a Mossad guy, I'd say, please do not station me at Dien Bien Phu, because I'm done if they get pissed. Before we go, your thoughts on just on this, the current state of Israel internally. Have you seen this where apparently what's his name? Netanyahu has been fighting with the military. He's saying, let's do this. The military is saying, we don't want to. He's saying, let's invade and take all of Gaza. And people are saying, but then all of the hostages, the ones that aren't dead, will surely die. And all of this kind of stuff and this doesn't come back to what we're saying. The internal fighting inside of the empire, the dysfunction inside of the empire, as Israel does the unthinkable genocide. This whole thing's coming unraveled, Jim. Anyway, I'll throw that to you before we go.
Yeah. So Dien Bien Phu, but there was the American base on Hamburger Hill, was it? I forget the name of the hill they were on for years. That was we gotta hold on to this and hold on, and they did for a long time, and then they lost it. Anyway, same kind of thing. And with the Israelis, look, you can't. This is having an effect on Israeli society. It's a small effect right now in the sense you see these young kids who are saying, "I'm not going into this war. This is a genocide. I don't want to be killing children." You see the suicides among Israeli soldiers, okay? So that's a small thing, but those things start small, and it does undermine socially and culturally what's going on, and you can't let it go on. Plus, people have to get back into their homes. The economy has to function. You have all the young men and women in the army trying to take over Gaza. So there's a kind of, in a limited sense, rationality faction in Israel said, well, let's not be so openly genocidal and child killing and etc. And let's not keep our economy and our population at war in order to do this. This is not helping us. It's going to undermine us, and it is. Again, unfortunately, not in time. I don't think in time for the Palestinians, but the problem is this is Zionism. This is what it wants to do. Its project is the Greater Israel Project. Its project is we cannot be stopped by those kinds of considerations. We must go forward, and this is our mission, our historical and existential and theological mission is to take over this territory and rid it of these subhuman people. And that's what we're going to do. And that faction is dominant, and it has political support. It has dominant political support. And until and unless Israeli society and Israeli people are hurt in every sense of the word by what they're doing, not just hurt by the fact that, some soldiers feel bad about it and they won't go into the war, but until and unless they're losing their economic lives and their physical lives by doing this, and they're having to confront, if we continue to this, our houses are going to be blown up, our children are going to be killed, our sons and daughters are going to be killed, our cities are going to be hurt. Until and unless that happens, they're going to go forward, and somebody's got to realize that and decide what they're going to do. Well, everybody is realizing it and deciding what they're doing right now, and nobody's doing anything about it, because the Americans are saying anybody who comes in and tries to do something about that, we're going to be fighting with Israel. So this is the situation. At some point, if they get into this war with Iran again, which I think they will, that may happen. But the Iranians have to look at this. They have to be, no, we're not, okay, I'm going to tell you where I'm going to hit so that you can get your soldiers out. No, they're going to, I'm surprise hitting this base in Israel that's in the middle of the city. If it's in the middle of a city, it's a military base, it's a target. And I'm not going to tell you where I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hit it and blow the shit out of it as much as possible. And you better if you want to evacuate civilians, get them all from around the military bases all over the country. Iran has to be all in on this. Everybody has to, and everybody who claims not to want American hegemony in the world and not to want genocide in the world has to be all in. If there's a American-Israeli attack on Iran, which I think there will be, has to be all in. We're in this to defeat Israel and the United States if it decides to stay with it, to defeat it and to defeat Zionism, which will never stop until it's defeated. So that's the, that and what's going on with Russia and Ukraine are, of course, the most consequent battles in the world today, and that's where we're facing, and it's an extremely dangerous situation. Jim
Kavanaugh, tell everybody where they can find you online.
Please find me on my Substack, which is on the screen, and a Twitter at the Polemicist _ and buy me a coffee or subscribe to my Substack, although you can subscribe for free or for paid. And I look forward to getting a lot of new subscribers from talking to you, Garland.
Awesome. Everybody follow me on Telegram, follow me on Rumble and Rockband, all that kind of stuff. You see everything Substack, of course. You see my P.O. box there if you want to send me something on the P.O. box. Additionally, what I got, PayPal, buy me a coffee, Patreon, all that kind of stuff. The most important thing that you can all do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.
Take it easy.